Everyone, welcome to the closing bell. Mark Boyer, Jason Jacobi here. We are switching it up, ladies and gentlemen. We are going more topical for our closing bell. So each week we are going to come at you live with a different topic from the week, a big storyline, big news, big economic indicator that we're looking at. But this week we have something really special and close to our hearts. It is energy. It is fossil fuels are going nowhere anytime soon. And that might sound like a provocative headline, and it is used as a provocative headline in the major news media, but it's not meant to be. We're just going to have a conversation about it. Let's talk about fossil fuels, right, Mark? And
Yeah.
and what it's got in store as we look at it from a global, a macro scale, and a micro scale here in California. So let's dive into it. But before we do, I think our listeners and viewers need a little bit of a background here, Mark. So if we look at the S&P 500 as a whole of 500 companies, okay, energy accounts for just 4%, which is a historically low level, right, in terms of
Yeah.
company weighting in the
Yeah.
S&P 500.
Yeah. Usually 7% is kind of the natural weighting has been for energy in the S&P. So yeah, so it's lower than it has been. It might be because one reason for that right now is that energy and energy stocks haven't moved like technology
Yeah.
information. I mean, you got the Nvidias and different AI stocks that have really moved and kind of, so because of that, we've been watching and been investors in some of the oil stocks, because they got great dividends and,
Mhm.
and fossil fuels aren't going anywhere long term, but those places, just haven't moved a whole lot. So anyway, so typically it's roughly 7, and right now we're sitting at about 4% of the S&P in the energy space.
So do you think also that has something to do with current challenges in the energy sector? Obviously, previous administration, we were more energy independent. Now, for a multitude of reasons, that has changed drastically. For example, which again, I want your personal thoughts on this from a personal level and a level of somebody that watches energy companies and their movements, their earnings, revenues, and so forth, and production. So, if we look at the historical production for the Permian Basin, which is the largest, we're sitting on the largest oil reserves in the world, right? I mean, this is just, it is what it is. Um, there's been a 3-year production decrease in overall production of oil and gas in that Permian Basin. So for the last 3 years. Now, U.S. growth, from what we've heard and people we've listened to, experts in this specific field, right? We're not going to pretend to be experts in everything oil and gas. We take information from sources and we digest it and put our own Boyer financial personal spin on it. But there's really been a lack of investment, right? Maybe on the supply chain side. Is there anything that stands out to you on that side of things that might cause some extra challenges?
Well, like you said, I mean, we've slowed down. Oil has become sort of a bad word, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like you're not you're not virtuous or whatever if you're talking about burning fossil fuels anymore. But
Mm-hmm.
they're like we talked about. I mean, but the reality is fossil fuels are a major part of our economy. And in the last few years, especially, I mean, it's really, we've really slowed down drilling. Like you said, I mean, our production out of the Permian Basin has just been dropping, and less money's been putting into new production, new, basin, finding oils, things like that. I mean, it
Yeah.
hasn't been worth it for the companies to get out and go, look to increase production. And so thus, we're all that's slowing down, and you're getting to a place where you just don't you haven't built anything, and it's not like these are like hey, I'm gonna build a new refinery tomorrow. It's like these are long projects that have slowed down slowly, and then to ramp them back up eventually could be a challenge. So I think that's the current situation in the world is, especially in the U.S., is, we haven't been putting money into those places as much as we like, and also we're insufficient, as we understand. We've we've grown insufficient exports. Liquidification. They talked about taking natural gas and making it liquid.
Yep.
Transport of energy like natural gas and coal
Yeah.
across railroads and shipping lanes. All that stuff is we're just not in a place right now where we're very strong to
To
so
handle that.
a
Yeah.
lot of all the move to renewable and all these great ideas are already putting us, in my opinion, kind of in a perilous situation with our true needs of energy, and that's in fossil fuels.
And I think that's something really key. Again, we're not hammering renewable energy. That's not what
No,
we're doing here. But I think it's important to be decisive. I think it's important to be um, awakened to the fact that, which we'll get into in a few minutes in the podcast, about how much fossil fuel is used in renewable energy as well, in the production of car batteries, things of that nature. We'll get there. But yeah, it's new ideas are great, like you said. That's part of the evolution of economies and growth of and human nature to strive to be better than we have been, right? And to push society forward.
yeah,
So 100% agree with that. Now, let's talk and break down a little bit more of pricing dynamics. Obviously, there's different ways to price things, right? Like a ton of coal, that's how they price coal. Natural gas, like parts per million, I think, something like that. You've got price per barrel for oil. That's how we kind of look at what we're paying for a barrel of oil and then transported into or refined into gas, excuse me. Um, but they're all measured in BTUs, which is like the burning units, basically. And that's how we kind of look at how things burn and how it creates energy. Because when things are, not to get into the chemical composition of things, but as things change their chemical composition, that's how you get combustion. That's how you get energy to be emitted from these organisms, per se. So, can you give us a little price history on oil per barrel? Let's just focus on oil since we're talking about it for now. So I know we were
yeah.
just looking at that a few minutes ago.
Yeah, so currently we're around what West Texas crude somewhere around $81 right
Mhm.
now, and part of the
Yep.
reason why, just so our audience understands, we've been thinking about this a lot because I don't know if you noticed lately, but oil has started to kind of ramp up a little bit in here, and energy stocks and you know uh, the big companies like Chevron, Exxon, some of the
Yeah.
drillers, a lot of them are starting to move, and we haven't seen that in a while. So I think that's part of what we're talking about here is where it looks to seem like oil starting to pick up steam. So it's interesting at 81 dollars and a barrel. You look historically, typically I think we got used to $40. We've been in $40 all the way from the mid 80s to kind of almost into the early 2000s,
Mhm.
and then coming out of into the 2000s after everything happened with 9/11. And I'm not saying it was tied to that, but
Right.
in those years, you know uh, oil went up to, at one point it got as high as in 2008 in the financial crisis, as high as almost $200. 198.52 is kind of as high as crude got at that point. That was crazy, right? And then you have
Yep.
this extreme. Then it went way back down in '08, all the way back down to the kind of close to where we are now, and then spiked up again, and then here even all the way into COVID, when COVID at the bottom, we've got down to $47 a barrel.
That's
And so now
wild.
we're sort of in that mid-range back, right? So with energy and energy prices, you can get some real extreme volatile pricing, based on just economies and
Mhm.
events of the world, wars, and especially in the
Supply
Middle
chain
East.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah, different things like that, especially when you get into that Middle East section where we get Iran and Iraq, all the oil, Saudi Arabia, those places
Hmm.
are significant from a geopolitical standpoint. So anyway, a lot of all that the point of it is very volatile area as far as the and right now we're just getting a little move up, which is interesting to see how that progresses here.
Yes, we're moving into the seasonality of oil and in
Yes,
terms of price
summer
movement
months.
upwards, right? Summer's coming up, spring, people are getting out of their winter slumber, hibernating like bears. That's what I've been doing. I don't know about you. Get my butt back in the gym now.
I'm ready for spring, bro. It's really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, like supply and demand, right? So OPEC's cut their production per day in oil production there, and obviously us being energy dependent again, it hurts
Yeah.
that and makes us pay more in terms of importing oil from foreign nations. So yeah, so you've got that seasonality where the demand's going to go up, supply has been cut, props up prices, right? Which again, revenues and earnings are gonna earnings per share will drive market performance and drive the energy sector upwards, which we could talk about
Which,
later as well.
well, which affects us, right? Because it's, again, we've been talking about inflation, and then, you get into the CPI, PPI, and then it's like,
Yes.
X energy, and like,
Yep.
well, how can you throw energy out of that number? Because man, I got to fill up my car, and so people are like, well, that's part of my, monthly expenses. And
Yeah.
so, and then gas prices are interesting because, you know, as they go up, it depends on kind of where you live, because the price of gasoline is interesting because, we've dropped, like talked about earlier, a lot of our refineries since COVID, we've shut down a lot of refineries since
Mm-hmm.
that period of time. And so the gas, again, you know, not a lot of, not a lot of drilling going on. That, supply demand, that throws the prices, up. Low supply, high
Yep.
demand, prices go
Yep.
higher. And then it's funny because it sort of depends on where you live, right? I mean,
Yep.
and I go back to the Midwest, or East Coast, from California. Like, gosh, price is so cheap here. It's like, it's like,
Why?
it seems like half the price of what we pay in California. And there again, California, tax heavy, a lot of
Yep.
fees and expenses in our price of gas that we pay out here. So, it's just a lot of sales tax, blah blah, and it all, it kind of all just piles up on you. And so it sort of depends on where you are, kind of, what state you're involved and live in. But basically, we're sort of in this range right now, 70 to 95 per barrel right now. And again, that's about double what we paid just, not that long ago in the 40s, right? So it's, so that's again another reason why energy's, been more of a drag on household spending.
Those are really, really good points. And going back to California, I mean, so we're paying more per barrel or sorry, per gallon of gas at the pump because there's a disparity in what we're paying per barrel. I mean, that's pretty congruent across the United States, right? But in terms of sales tax, in terms of gas tax here in California, California has the highest state gas tax rate in the United States at 77.9 cents per gallon. So
Wow.
that's part of the reason why we're paying more.
Yeah.
Um, but let's dive in a little bit deeper into macro. Let's look at macro. Let's look at the globe and how the energy composition and consumption of fossil fuels, of alternative energies, is composite. The composite numbers of that around the world. So, did you know that a third of the world's energy comes from oil, coal, and natural gas? So a third each. So 30% comes from oil, 30% from coal, and about 30% for natural gas. The other 10% is alternative energy like hydro, nuclear, etc. And also even like biofuel, things of that nature. So what does that tell you? Fossil fuels aren't going anywhere.
We're not going anywhere. I mean, how do you, I mean, that's a lot of years of, look, so humankind, we've always been looking to figure out how to, burn fuel. Fossil fuels have been a place, one area that's kind of, we were talking about this, going back thousands of years,
Mm-hmm.
ask the question. So what's been the longest, what are some of the old style ways of energy
Fuel.
that they use?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Fuel.
Uh-huh.
Coal's been around for a long, long time. But even before
Mm-hmm.
that, what's tell our audience what the main source
Whale,
of fuel early on?
whale, was it whale oil?
Whale
Whale
oil.
oil.
Yeah, whales. Right. I mean, it's part of the reason why they were, you know, um, those ships way back when they were going out and just killing whales because of the whale oil and using the oil from the whales to burn and to create fuel. So again, so humans have been looking for things to build, to burn trees, which are like biomass, things like that. There's always been an unsatiable desire to have something to burn as fuel. So it's interesting how it's been that way. You don't think about that, but you always think about you know oil only, but it's a lot of other things as well.
And trajectory, speaking of human nature and always looking for different types of energy to burn, to utilize, to further their plans for expansion or whatever it may be, or to fuel food production, because obviously you need some kind of energy to, we used to be horse and, horse plow was the energy. The horse was the energy for the horse, eats the grass and the feed and, there's a lot of different ways that the energy is utilized. It's not just oil or coal or whatever it may be, but if you look at the trajectory of history and you look at what is the only fuel type that has fallen off, coal continues to grow, fossil fuels continue to grow.
Yep.
The only thing that has decreased is whale
Natural
oil use, right? Because
That's
obviously that's,
something we're talking about. That's the only one that kind of went away.
yeah,
Uh, killing whales just became really not very attractive, and
yeah,
rightfully so. So,
yeah,
and I know,
absolutely.
but that's the only one that's gone away. The rest of them have all grown, and
Mhm.
it's interesting. Those are interesting facts that we don't talk about a whole lot.
So again, looking at the macro scale, and again, Mark, I want your take on this. We'll kind of break down the international numbers of energy here because I think it's really important for our viewers and listeners. Again, looking at the macro approach, we live in our own bubbles here in Orange County, Texas, New York, wherever you live, right? You have your community bubble, and we kind of see things through the lens of which we've grown up in or that we're at now. But if you look at non-fossil fuel energy usage globally, okay, it's less than 2%
Yeah.
globally. And our economies, our populations, for the most part, there's more people. I know certain economies, they're shrinking, population decreases, such as China, the US, right? Like we're having labor force issues down the road. We will because there are less births per family. So talk a little bit about that and talk about, the study that was done about the renewable energy in Europe, that 50% of Europe's energy usage. I think that's really important to look at.
Yeah, well, there was a study done. The basically what happened is they claimed that there was 50% of the usage in energy usage in Europe was renewable,
Uh-huh.
and we were talking to one of our analysts who basically said, he's like, "What? Really? That's really high. That's
Yeah.
impressive." But
Yeah.
then, as they looked more into it and dug down, turns out that it was, they were looking at a time period of only probably a couple months, and it was solar, and it was really sunny at that time, and so as they dug into it, it ended up being a much lower position. I forget what the number was. Do you remember what the percentage was on that?
Yeah,
Uh,
so basically, the 50% number was only the percentage of electricity usage to like power your lights and things of that nature. So it was just like home usage. So a lot of that came from solar, like you said, maybe hydro, wind powered.
yeah,
But most of it was solar because they do have a lot of solar energy capabilities there. But again, Europe, if you've ever been over there, it's not the
no,
sunniest place in the world.
yeah,
And this study was done when there was a few months of constant sun, so they're able to power 50% of their electricity, utilize renewable energy, which is still great. But if you dive deeper, and again, I think this is something that you've talked about, the total power mix, so all power usage, all energy usage for Europe, only 17% was renewable, which is a stark contrast to the 50% that
yeah,
certain agenda users might try to implement or use in their studies. But 17% was only the amount that was renewable. You break that down even further, 5% of that 17 was hydro, super clean,
mm,
not good for the environment though, because basically you're blowing up, tops of mountains next to highly populated
yeah,
areas.
killing animals.
Exactly. It disrupts that natural habitat. 11% of that is biomass fuel, which you talked about a few minutes ago. Burning trees in the US
Trees.
South actually funds a lot of Europe's biomass fuel usage. So, what do trees do? They produce twice as much CO2 as coal. So you're trying to be more renewable, clean energy, biomass fuel, which again the thought is great, but they're burning twice the amount of trees, or they're burning trees that emit twice the amount of CO2, which is the harmful composition, for our atmosphere and global warming and all that kind of agenda talk. Um, that's really interesting to see, wouldn't you say? And you have to replant those trees, right? If you want to use them again, you got to replant the trees and wait for them to grow again. So
No
where's the
doubt.
give and take of being sustainable, which is great. We want to have sustainable stuff and to live healthy and not have, be walking in pollution and all that. That's all great. But how do we get there? And how do we become a more conscious society, like realizing, oh yeah, we want to be more renewable, it makes sense, but how do we balance the dueling realities of that, would you say?
It's tough. I mean, because the reality is you need to be productive. You need to get when you're cold. You need to heat up your home. You need something to work. You got
Yeah,
to I mean, we've gotten used to that, right? It's not like we don't have fires anymore. I know where we live. You're not even supposed to burn wood anymore because of the in
yeah.
certain areas, in fireplaces. And if you got to cook, you just want to be able to have the convenience
Gas
of
stoves.
life, that really has come from fossil fuels, frankly. I mean, if you go back and look at when fossil fuels, we started using this in America, I mean, it changed everything. We're a healthier society today because of really efficient energy uses,
There
because
you
we've
go.
been able to clean up. I mean, think about the early advice, people that came over into America, that they came and they settled, the settlers, and then what happened? Well, they get sick from the water
Hmm.
was not good, and there was animals pooping upstream and all these things
Yeah,
happening, that they were getting all kinds of diseases, and then they were able to take fossil fuels, in perhaps mostly, and different ways of burning, cleaning up that water, cleaning up
sewage
so that
systems, all
people
that.
sewage, all that was what improved our way of life. And then now today, I mean, everything we do, move, we travel, we jump on a plane. I mean, it's not solar planes. It's not a maybe someday we'll get there, but we're not even close to it at this point. So it's difficult, because we all don't want to be we don't want to be inconvenienced. At the same time, we want to clean things up
Yeah.
and be good stewards of the earth that God's given us. But at the same
Yep.
time, you got to be practical and real about how this is all working. And I think that's I get off on a soapbox with this stuff, but
No, that was a
you
good
can't.
point.
You have to do that, because it's silly when and we'll talk here about you know um,
Green
just
energy, yeah.
clean energy here in a bit, and like CO2 and all that. I mean, it's quite astounding when you hear the actual statistics and facts about how much CO2 is emitted in even these new clean energy forms, and what it takes to make that happen. So anyway, it's a really interesting subject, and I think bottom line for us, I don't want to be inconvenienced. Like, I want to be able to do things. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody nearly does. We don't want to pay the price. It's like when I was in training camp back in the day. We were at New York, and with the Jets, and it was a hot summer day in New York. We got up early, first practice, early morning, always the worst, humid. It's like just and I'll never forget our line coach. We were just dreading. It was just one of those days where you're like, I don't want to practice today. And he stops us and looks at gathers us up and says, um, he goes, everyone wants to go to heaven, men, but nobody wants to die. And his point was like, you got to pay the price, right? If you want to get to the Super Bowl, the playoffs, this is when you got to pay the price, when it's no
Yeah.
fun. And the reality is that our our world, our economy, everything's works so smooth. It's not like we want to go backwards and have these things not work the way they should when we're used to good things um, being good and having made us more efficient and more healthy and in all these different practical areas. So it's really interesting. It's quite a dynamic.
Absolutely. So basically, we need to realize that we don't need to go through massive growing pains. I'm sure you remember when you were starting to grow, like your knees, your ankles, whatever was hurting so bad. I remember laying in bed just like on the verge of tears because it was just like it was a painful time. Like you're growing, you're going through a lot of change. And we could limit those growing pains. There's always going to be growing pains as we change and grow and develop, but we can limit the severity of it if we can say, hey, let's be real, like you said, let's realize that fossil fuels are going nowhere. Let's use it to utilize and progress and move energy even more forward. Not correct English there, but let's move it forward. Let's continue
Yeah,
to innovate and grow. That's the great thing about the human spirit and human nature. We're always looking to do that, but there we can find neat ways to use natural gas, which is seen as a dirty fuel, a dirty energy. They're starting to crack off that carbon molecule and clean it and utilize that for clean energy. You see these like clean energy natural gas buses driving around right now. So I think
yeah,
that's probably going to be the future of
yeah,
gas and energy. Is like going to be like a renewable gas or a natural gas or hydrogen that they're going to really utilize in a clean way. Uh,
absolutely.
but and fossil fuels will help us get to that point or even be utilized in that renewable sphere as well.
No doubt. And that's what's great about capitalism. If you let
Mhm.
people work and you stop restricting us of what we can find, I mean,
Yep.
we're going to find the best solutions to these. Companies are going to do that. If there's
Yep.
money to be made somehow to
Hmm.
put food on the table for families and so forth, they're going to find a way to make this better.
Uh-huh.
I've seen a significant difference, frankly. I mean, I'm old enough to know this. I mean, I remember I grew up in LA. I remember, times in the 60s and 70s where the warning would be out. You couldn't even see downtown LA because of the smog. And
Hmm.
I'm amazed now, living, further out from LA, that there's many mornings I can wake up and see the mountains from, 40
Yeah.
miles away when I couldn't see literally the downtown buildings from when I was at SC from like blocks. I mean,
Yeah.
we couldn't even see it. And so it's gotten better and it will continue to get better. But where we get in trouble, okay, is when groups start trying to pound something down and
Hmm.
force you to go somewhere when we're not ready to do so, and it doesn't make any sense. And that's the part that gets us in trouble. And to some degree, I think could cause some problems for us here in the near term
Absolutely.
because of what's happened with fossil fuels and the whole, evil like Darth Vader idea of oh, you're a bad guy if you're for burning gas. It's like, are you kidding me? I mean, but because of that,
Hmm.
these companies have, like I said, slowed down their they're not, they've cut down pipelines, they've closed down refineries, all these things, because they have to make money to do this. So if you're not going to take it, if you're going to go outside and buy it from another country, it causes us to have a problem. And what could happen, because our our demand is not going to change a whole lot, but if our supply drops, we're going to get, again, higher prices. And that's where looking at energy stocks and so forth, and all this to say is that could be good investments right now as they, if they start to roll up in here, especially, what we've been talking about is there's good opportunities. I think price to book, with
Yep.
as low for these energies. It got high. They got really good,
Dividends.
dividends that they pay. Frankly, energy probably is going to be, moving higher here in terms of profitability, and then that weighting to the S&P will probably increase. All
Yeah.
things will come back to the median there. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons to probably like energy in here for some of those concrete reasons.
Yeah, and I want to go back to your point you make about near-term growing pains and near-term issues that we could run into. For example, I mean, you're looking at Newsom signed into law that there will be no more gas cars produced in California after 2035, I believe it was, right?
Yeah.
Which is the dumbest thing you could do, and I'm going to call it out as it is. again, I
Symbiotic.
mean, again, this is more about forcing an agenda down somebody's throat. We've all just talked about, hey, yeah, let's go forward. Let's go towards renewable energy. Let's get cleaner and better and all that kind of stuff. But you can't force feed this down Californians' throats any longer. I mean, you're seeing demand for EVs start to go down because we'll get into that in a second. But you're seeing like car companies that were going more EV, like, oh yeah, we're this is the energy revolution. They're producing less EV vehicles because the consumer doesn't want it, and they're all about making money. Like you said, capitalism. They want to drive forward the markets. They want to make money, put food on the table, have corporate growth, and be better. But
Be better.
this mandate is absolutely crazy, and so we're starting to see the pushback of
Well,
that.
well, yeah, look what's happening. I mean, yeah, so we're all for being better. And again, it sounds great on paper, right? I mean, to do this, to get to fully renewable energy, no gas cars, and it all sounds virtuous and fantastic. Like, hey,
Uh-huh.
it's just, it sounds so heavenly, but
Utopian, yeah.
utopian. But it's just the reality is if it's not, if it doesn't help people still live their lives and get to what they need to do, and it's just not, it's not possible until the technology is there to where it makes sense and it's more economical for you
Yep.
to do that. So those are all things that are there. You can't really, again, you always have trouble when you got governments mandating something. And what we're seeing now is that a lot of those companies, I mean, look at Ford, I
Yep.
mean, Mercedes, all these companies are coming out right now.
Yeah.
Tesla's struggling like crazy because
Yep.
there's a group of people, frankly, it looks like there's been a group of people who are all in on EVs, right? Just want it. They're going to buy it because they're just going to buy it. I mean, because they believe in it, they want to buy it. And that's great. But there's another group of people, okay, a large group of people, a majority group of people who are not convinced that that's where they want to go. And
Yeah.
so now, they've stopped. These companies have actually put tons of dough into the EV markets, and now they're just losing just
Hand
tons of
over
money,
fist. Yep.
dollars, in that investment because all these EVs are still sitting on the lot and nobody's buying them.
Mm-hmm.
So what's California going to do at that point? You're going to, you know, you're going to force us. You're going to put it. I mean, what, you say like, and maybe so. I mean, I could see that happening, right? Some way you get into that place, but
So, Mark, I have a
I
question
know
for
you
you.
want to do it. It's crazy.
I have a question for you. So, how are you gonna? Let's say you're forced to buy an electric car one day. How are you gonna be able to charge it in the summer months or in the warmer months in California? Excuse me. Excuse me, that because we already have rolling brownouts and blackouts and telling us to conserve energy. What happens when everyone has an electric car and needs to charge their car every single night when you have ACs running, like, and you already have astronomically high electric prices, and now they're talking about having a
Yeah.
tiered wage system. So if you earn over 180,000, you're paying almost $100 on average more a month
Yeah.
on top of your normal electricity bill. So this just doesn't seem, again, we're looking at it from an economical and common sense
Yeah.
standpoint. The numbers don't add up. So I think that's really interesting. I want people to think about, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, does it make sense? Not at this point.
Well, not to mandate it. Again, these
Yeah.
are great. If
Right.
you want to buy that, if you want to do it,
Totally.
great. But
Yep.
don't try to force everybody else to do it too. And until it's going to take a while. We made the comment at the very beginning. We are not ready to get rid of fossil fuels. We're not even close.
No.
We're
Decades. Hundreds of years.
we're 100 years maybe away from that. Seriously. Like, I mean, we're not even close. And so, it's silly to live in this, you call it, you know, uh,
Utopian thought
utopia
process.
is a place where I just don't think it's going to happen. So you're going to get a lot of pushback, and then it'll probably depend on who wins the next elections too. There's a lot of politics involved in this, but ultimately, I think it's going to play out the way it usually plays out in capitalism. I mean, eventually, the consumers will make those decisions what they want to do, and the businesses have to adjust, and that's what's happening right now.
Amen to that, and I think that's a good point. And before we end this podcast, again, we're not hammering on anything. We're just giving our listeners and viewers a reason to ponder and think. And to be, again, tie this back to the global economy, our local economy, I think it affects every single one of us in every sector, in every way. So, and the last thought to think about is, if you want to turn the world green, again, if you want, again, I think everyone wants, again, to be more renewable and take care of the earth that God's given us. It's such a beautiful place. It's great.
Yeah,
We
and it's
love
come
being
a
in
long way.
nature.
And
You
it's
love
come
to
a
be
long
out and
way, like I
fish.
said earlier.
Yeah, you love to be on the lake fishing. I love to be in the mountains snowboarding. Like, there's nothing more beautiful than being out in nature. Amen to that. However, we need to realize what it takes in order to be renewable, in order what it takes to be green. So you need a ton of natural resources, right? You need copper, cobalt, lithium, nickel, all types of metals. An investment of fossil fuels to achieve total clean energy will be very intensive. Because why? Why would you think so, Mark? What would be some examples of using fossil fuel to basically make those batteries? Like, how would that work?
Well, I mean, if you've ever seen, I mean, there's huge. You have to dig up a lot of ground to find the metals, like you just mentioned,
Yep.
to basically, even create a battery. There's their digging up of cobalt, all these things that they have to do then you have to transport it. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to get it, you have to process it, then you have to transport it to a place like China, who makes a
Uh-huh.
lot of these batteries, nickel, copper, right?
Yep.
And then you ship them to China, you package it all, and then you transform these same products into like battery materials, and then guess what? Then you got to send it back to the U.S. for them to, for
Put it in
the
Teslas
manufacturers to
or
put in a
wherever.
Tesla
Yeah.
or an EV. So there's a lot of CO2 emitted in actually the production of these EV, products and vehicles that a lot of people don't think about. And you and I kind of heard something on this recently, and it was like, I think the number was for a Tesla that to break even on CO2 emissions on a Tesla, the Tesla has to drive at least 40,000 miles to hit just the break even point,
Yeah, to be
um,
carbon
to
neutral.
be
Yep.
carbon neutral. Um, and it's kind of the same idea with hydro, wind farm, all that stuff, right? So all the production to build it,
Mm-hmm.
CO2 emissions, now once you have the car, great, it's a beautiful car, no complaints with Teslas, but you're going to have to drive that at least 40,000 miles before you're actually starting to be, reduce carbon emissions. So that's crazy thought that we don't think about a whole lot, right? So
And then we haven't even gotten to the point of battery. You have to replace a battery every X amount of
yeah,
miles. That means the whole process starts over again. So
it's
again, it's
interesting.
about being smart and realizing, hey, this is all great technology, but let's not mandate. Let's not put the government oversight and the hammer on everything else just because you want something to be a certain way. Like you said, capitalists. That's why capitalism is the greatest economic system in the world, because like you said, the consumer will drive that and which way it wants to go, and that's going to fuel growth and innovation and help
Yeah.
push our economy forward. So
Yeah. So to wrap it up, I think for us, part of the reason we picked this week is that we're seeing a little movement in the oil stocks.
yep.
Probably is going to. My guess is it's going to continue this
Mhm.
summer. I mean, we're going to see higher gas prices into a lot more travel. Um, I heard some numbers about jet fuel consumption right now is still really low compared to COVID pandemic times. So that hasn't even gotten back up to its full. Might be because Boeing, all these might be
Yeah.
because we weren't afraid to fly anymore. What's happening? I don't know, but so all that said is that, and then with the inability to ramp up quickly, having shut down some refineries and things like that, there's a real argument you can make for higher oil prices, back to, I don't know, 100 and plus, barrels. We'll see. I mean, I'm not saying that for sure, but it looks like it could be, and thus, might make part of a portfolio a place where you want to, put a little money into some of those types of investments.
All good points, Mark. Always great to sit here and chat with you. And we'll be with you next week on the closing bell with a different topic. But until next time, salt and pepper. We're
All right.
here. We're spicy. We're savory. You love it. See you next time.
See you, man.